I'm going to mention just briefly, maybe this can be captured in segments over a period of time with a few other plants, but just briefly, since we've been seeing some plants and I'm saying, hey, gather a bag of this, collect it this way, prune this way, just a few minutes spent with ethical wildcrafting and reinforcing that, mentioning that, sharing that. Sometimes it gets overlooked, or sometimes I personally sometimes assume we're on the same page. And it's often not the case. It's kind of like, because I realize I've been in the forest a long, long time, in the desert, in the jungles, and and with plants a long, long time. And so I see the forest differently, and it comes in time for all of us. The more you spend out here, the more you see the connections, the interconnections, the dependency on all the life forms on each other out here, the circle of life. And we're disconnected. We don't see the intricacies and all. We don't see all the codependency, and we don't see how it fits into things. And we come in and we harvest, and we take a bunch of stuff, and we chop this, and we prune this, and we dig this, and and it's like, how does this impact? How does this impact all the other life forms in the circle of life? We need to like, number one, I think we always need to slow down. We need to slow down. We need to walk a bit before we collect. We need to really examine, say if we're interested in monarda, or we're interested in raspberry bushes, or we're interested in redroot for harvesting as medicine, for gathering as medicine. We want to survey the populations. We want to get a head count. We want to see how abundant it really is. We really want to count, just count. Really also evaluate how many people come here, other herbalists. Look at the two-legged aspect. You making a head count. Wow, I count. Since we started seeing them so far, just in this small section of the red raspberry shrubs of the Rubus neomexicana, saw there's about 10 right here that you can see. There's a whole bunch more there, and then some more on the other side that I saw. So 10. So I'm like, okay, and there's some really big ones. There's a fair amount of medicine just right here. But I'm gonna walk. I also know this mountain. I know there's thousands of them out here, up and down the highway, and in the nooks and crannies, and up in all these rivulets. So over many years, I've gotten an idea of what the population is, what would be sustainable. Also, I evaluate commerce, right? Is it a bioregional herb? Is it or is it a very popular herb in commerce and picked by a lot of people in a lot of places all the time? This is something to consider, right? There's, even before you touch these plants, even before you prune them, even before you dig them, there's a lot of factors in what sustainability means. Thinking about its place in herbal commerce, thinking about the herbalists that live in your region, in your bioregion, who may use the same mountain as you do, right? Think about maybe students that have come to these mountains, not just from your group, my group, but other people's students coming up. How many people are really gathering off this mountain? You'll never know in totality, but you can guesstimate just through your own experience and your own connections. You can get an idea. Look at Sedona and Oak Creek Canyon. A fairly big canyon, long, lot of tributaries. There are a lot of medicine plants, but a lot of plant-savvy people in Sedona. How many of those people go out and gather a handful of this and a handful of that? It's worth keeping track of, right? It's worth noticing. You live in an area where people are herbally literate in many respects. I live in a community that is herbally literate because of the Hispanic population and their traditions and their connections. Families, I meet families out in the forest gathering medicines. And I'm like, wow, gosh, this doesn't happen everywhere in the United States. But knowing these things, knowing how to, knowing what's going on with the humans. Remember, the greatest teachers will be the ones you're going to seek and collect always, more than the two-leggeds. Two-leggeds are just telling their stories, sharing their experiences, telling you how to make some pharmacy stuff with the plants properly that they've learned, passing on some oral tradition. But I always talk about one of my greatest teachers, one of my greatest two-legged influences is of course Michael Moore. And when I look at the influence in my herbal life, there's very few humans that have impacted me as greatly as my teacher Michael Moore, Mimi, I consider Mimi a great influence in my life with herbal medicine and energetics, without a doubt. Michael and Mimi and others, but the plants themselves are at the top for me. I mean, but it takes years to get there. It takes some time, it takes some work to get there, to hear the voices, to hear the dialogue, to realize that the plants are the real teachers. And the rest of us are just monkeys who kind of two-legged, that kind of drag you along on the journey and get you out here to meet them. And so you can continue the journey with them on your own, because that's where the real juju's at. That's where the real beauty's at. The blessings is you in this plant. And when I get out of the picture, your life with this plant it's up to you. You know, it's up to you and your journey. It's up to how you're going to travel with this around these plant medicines. And then, like, the more you read, the more you learn what insects might truly be dependent on this plant's flowers and no other flowers, right? The pollinating aspect. Like, there are some relationships, there are some plants. Here's an example of a plant, the milkweeds, right? The immortelle and the pleurisy roots, monarch butterflies. That's their main plant flower. They don't really deviate. They might use other milkweeds, but those are the two predominant milkweeds in their flyways and you haphazardly diminish a stand of immortelle, you've interfered with the migratory route of an endangered butterfly, the monarchs, threatened. And I mean, they're like back east in the Midwest and back east, they spray up and down along the highways in Kansas and in Missouri, specifically killing pleurisy root. Because it gets big and it kind of, like, whatever reasons, there are many states that spray poisons to kill the herbs along the road. So they kill a lot of pleurisy root on purpose to keep it knocked back from the highways. And pleurisy flowers, those big red giant flowers, monarchs depend upon that. When the monarchs are coming from the north, they're going from pleurisy root patch to pleurisy root patch. They're going from milkweed patch to milkweed patch on their way from North America to Mexico.
So we need to plant some in our properties.
Plant some and be aware that, if there's only 10 immortelles or 10 pleurisy roots, go find 20, a patch of 20 before you take a few for medicine. Because there's a whole nother life form totally dependent on this. These are things you learn over time. It's not things that you're going to know initially unless you do a little reading, listen, and educate yourself on the issue. But the concept of sustainability is a lot larger than you just learning to prune properly, you learning to, like, dig properly, you learning to reseed. These are all important things that I'll talk about. But my gosh, it's like I never realized what the true story of sustainability is about, because I'm looking at it very human-centered, I, me, mine, exclusive, excluding all the other life forms out of the picture, not really thinking about what I'm doing in the forest, right? Not taking a walk, surveying, counting how many there are, really realizing how many other people might come here, how many deer or bear or elk or birds or butterflies or spiders are dependent on this medicine plant, just like I am dependent on it. So the more you plug yourself into the circle of life and really get the gist of it, and it's a lifelong process, you're not going to get the whole story, you just keep doing it. And unfortunately, I made mistakes. And it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing to create harm out here in the forest, to gather too much, to prune improperly. It hurts me. It hurts my heart. And I don't do it again, and you come back and realize, wow, I pruned too heavily on this shrub and it died. I have seen the results of this, and I've learned from that. Nobody taught me that. Nobody educated me on that. Nobody even clued me in on the sustainability aspect 20 years ago. In the depth, in the depth that I travel with it now. Some basic stuff would be to, like, take a walk, count the plants, really discern your needs, like what, your true needs. Do you need enough for a pint? Are you just beginning to understand this plant? You don't really know, you don't have any clients, but you want enough to maybe make it for a few months or a year, to dabble with, to learn it, to maybe use it with a few people? Or, like you already have 10 people instantly after you hear the information, 10 people that you could use it with. So maybe you need a, half quart or, really be honest with yourself as to how much. I can't tell you how many students over so many years would come to Bear Creek Herbs with boxes of tinctures that they never used. And that's what I would use for my free clinic and such. I mean, they learned from me. I trusted their medicine making, but gosh, 3 years later, they still got everything that they made, and they were like made quarts because they were so excited. But their life turned a different direction, It's an honest thing, nothing, no blame or anything. And they had an outlet. They would bring me boxes of their tinctures, and I'll be like, and now I've learned that really good. I could encourage you to make lots, and
then give them back.
and knowing that I'm going to get them back someday, right? I could do that, but I don't, So it's not a nice thing to do. But it happens. It really happens. All of a sudden, somebody gets married, they have a baby, they move to Africa, they go study giraffes, they just go to Wall Street instead of being an herbalist. That's never happened, but it could happen. Give up their tinctures. So I do a head count. I think about what I really truly need as far as herbal, of like what I'm harvesting. Honestly, and it's easy to get excited. It's easy to think of like all the what ifs, and But if you don't have a real scenario going on, be generous with your, with the quantity. Be, on the low side. You can always come back, or you can always like ask another wildcrafter who lives nearby if you live far away to like, hey, I'm really using that. I ran out. Can I trade you something? That's all well and good. It's just like and to really realize you're making contact. This is a beautiful thing, and our contacts with plant medicines can be just one of the most gloriously beautiful moments in time, with total like cycle of life, give and take, and energy, kind of like, and the plants want you to gather. I'm truly convinced the plants want you to make contact, but they want you to make contact, and they want to raise your sentientness up so you make contact more gently as time goes on, and more sustainable, and it's a give and take, right? So it means like maybe like pruning off some dead branches, maybe it means like learning how to prune properly from an arborist or from an old horticulturalist who's been pruning shrubs and trees for 20 years. Learn their techniques. Learn to make cuts down by the juncture of the stems, not in the middle of the branches, Basic pruning techniques. Plants kind of respond. I literally see, when you prune properly, or you learn how the plant loves to be touched and pruned, the bounty that it gives you the next year because of your interface. I have watched medicine gardens glow and grow and be more bountiful because proper human interfacing took place. They thrive on this. They thrive on your love. They thrive on your caring. They thrive on your touch. And the more you can have clear love and clear touch and beneficial touch, the plants respond. They put more branches out. They seem to be happier. Plants really respond to disturbance sometimes. Like, there are more plants when there's gentle disturbing of the soil. There are more plants that come in after mammals and humans when it's been a gentle disturbance of the soil, not bulldozer disturbing, although sometimes bulldozers and road cuts actually created a bounty of plants for a while. So there is a greater diversity of plants where the wild meets the humans who are living gentle on the land. And there's great examples down in Oregon Pipe National Monument and right across the border in Mexico. Down at Oregon Pipe National Monument, there's an oasis called Quito Baquito, and the Tohono O'odham family that lived there, when they died, the national park, the national monument, didn't allow it to be transferred further down the family line. So it went back to a wild oasis, right? And it's pretty. It's beautiful, right? It's got a lot of stuff happening. It's this fresh water bubbling up, creating a pond in the middle of the Sonoran Desert down there in Oregon Pipe National Monument. You go right across the border into Mexico, like 10 miles south or so of the Quito Baquito National Monument Springs, And you go to the ones down there in Mexico, there's an old Tohono O'odham family still living there, has been living there around the springs, farming for a long, long time, for 100, 200 years. Who knows how long they've been there, but they've been continuously there. Gary Paul Nabahan, an ethnobotanist, did the plant survey, the animal survey, and the insect and reptile survey of the one in the National Monument. Then he went to the one 10 miles south of the border where the people were living gently with the wild, and everything was 30 to 40% more.
Wow.
40% more plant species, 40% more reptiles, 30% more insects, 30% more birds. Every category had more because of this gentle farming disturbance amongst the wild. Herbalists can be like this, okay? Herbalists, when they're gathering medicines, can be so beneficial to these medicine stands that the result of you visiting them and harvesting gently, you can make these struggling gardens sometimes thrive and proliferate and come back online. And I have 1,000 examples in my own life, with my own gardens, of watching that happen. I also believe that, like, there are times I've gotten so busy, and I mean, maybe it's very human-centered and maybe it's ego-laden a little bit, but there are times when I've not been able to visit a plant stand, and I go visit it, and it is sadder, it is drier, it is waning, it is not thriving, and I feel sometimes my relationship is something that's been missing. And I've literally been there on plant stands and say, like, hey, I'm sorry, I haven't been here in a long time. And it's like, because I believe that my presence creates an event that there's thriving. I thrive in my life from these medicines, and I know my touch makes them thrive and they proliferate. I just know that good herbal medicine, good wild crafting can be beneficial. It can be so beneficial. It can be so thriving. And I see plants respond to the touch, to the love, to all the elements of who we are. They want us to come home to the garden. They want us to make contact. They want us to touch them. They want us to prune them. They want us to grab some seeds, and they want to take their seeds and get them on your clothes. And so you spread them down the trail. Plant seeds, bring some extra water in the drought times. Water your medicine plants. This is like, I get rewarded. I get rewarded in so many other ways by serving the plants in that. They're my gardens. If I'm going to water the plants in my own yard when they're thirsty, why not take care of my wild medicine gardens when they're thirsty, when they're damaged, when they need help, when they need pruning? I think of, like, these gardens are no different than the gardens around my house. The same kind of stewardship, the same kind of respect, the same kind of gentle interfacing. So count your plants, really be honest with your needs. Make contact with these life forms, these entities. Like, seriously, give them the respect. These living beings, the respect they're due. Bring love into the equation. Bring love into your medicine making. Bring love into your wild crafting. That changes the dynamics of how you treat plants and how you see them. Learn to properly prune. Learn how your removal of a shrub can be beneficial. Like with this red root here that we're going to talk about. Like looking at a big cluster of red root, right? Where they're they're going to do fine without me coming in here and taking any, it looks like, but maybe if I go and take that one over there, amongst these 4 or 5, take the one over in the middle, that opens up a space. This one can get bigger, like thinning a little bit. Looking at how you can thin to make the stand healthier, providing some space. Thinking like how you're gardening, back in your garden. You can apply that to your wild gardens. And there are many, many other aspects of sustainability, and I'm sure it'll come up in a conversation. The other thing is to look at herbal commerce. If you've got something very common, very abundant, so sustainable that 1 million people could be using that tree, that shrub, those leaves off the branches, and there's something in commerce where you can feel confident that could replace it for a lot of its uses. No plant really replaces another plant, but in a linear train of thinking, You know, I mean, I don't buy viburnums anymore. I don't buy black haw. I don't buy cramp bark because they're over harvested in many parts of the Midwest. I use silk tassel. You know, I don't have to kill a single shrub to get the same antispasmodic effects that I would be getting from cramp bark or black haw. Now, cramp bark and black haw do other things. All plants do things other plants don't do. So there's really no total replacement. But if you're using a herb of commerce that's over-harvested, threatened for a specific use, and you can find that use in something common in your own area, replace it. So now you're affecting sustainability even outside of your bioregion by doing that. You're pulling out of herbal commerce. You're not buying a pound of cramp bark every year. You replaced it for menstrual cramps with silk tassel. And it works just as well, you know? So that's another aspect of sustainability to consider when using plants and like, where can you pull back out of herbal commerce? Wherever possible. You know, demand more sustainability, true, not the vogue words, it's ethically wildcrafted. That every big, giant, multi-million-dollar company's putting on their labels? Think about it. They make 10,000 tincture bottles of OSHA a month, fresh OSHA tincture, and it says ethically wildcrafted? Well, that's suspect, you know. Those same companies ask me, hey, Mr. Cottingham, can you get me 20,000 pounds of OSHA this year? And I'm like, what did you just say? No. I've also planted hundreds and hundreds of thousands of OSHA seeds. I now harvest OSHA from seeds that I planted 27 years ago. The roots are this big in diameter and they're this long. And they're from areas where I've got rebar on this mountainside that's been in place for 27 years, some rebar stakes, and we roped it off initially and we planted OSHA. And I can go to those rebar little plots, they're about 10 to 15 feet by 10 by 15 feet, and I harvest OSHA out of those now. And they're from 27 years ago. And I know every baby that I planted. That's ethical wildcrafting of OSHA, you know, and it's like I've got those spots on the mountains. That rebar is still in place. And it's really amazing. I never knew how big OSHA grows. You know, in 27 years, I now know from a seed that I put in the ground, and others of my friends of those days, we planted that. We started doing that. We thought of buying a property in the high country and growing OSHA because we saw right off the bat one day it was going to be, you know, tough. But, you know, last year, year before last, they don't call anymore, but we're talking about big companies that tout ethical wildcrafting asking me for 20,000 pounds. And, couple companies collectively 20,000, but you know 5,000 pounds from this company. I'm like, whoa, my gosh, you know, it's like I don't even know how a person could do that, you know, collect that much. Where are they getting it, you know? So herbal commerce is an aspect of sustainability and such, and you know, it's worth mentioning these. It's worth, you know, it'll deepen your connection, it'll enrich your connection. To serve people and to serve plants, the concept of serving plants really has an amazing different meaning for me now. When I'm stewarding my wild gardens, when I'm employing sustainable wildcrafting techniques, raising my consciousness around what that means in the wild with all those things that I mentioned, to me that's serving my plant allies who have served and given so much to me that I still feel I fall short of giving them what they deserve because I'm learning. It's a learning process.